All right, so I'm gonna do my best to get us closer on track on time. Uh, the challenge here is this is a really complicated intervention, so I'm going to give you the kind of bird's eye view of what we found. But this is so years ago, back in 2013, I was contracted to evaluate this program being run by New York State, and it's a focused deterrence program. And I'll just describe it very quickly. It was carried out in 5 sites across the state. The 3 biggest sites were in New York City, targeted toward high violence neighborhoods. Eligibility criteria were parolees with a violent felony conviction or a firearm arrest in their past. The program consisted of a single, it's called a notification forum or call-in meeting at a local community center. And I'll tell you what happened there in a sec. And it's part of this umbrella of programs that are known as falling under the strategy of focused deterrence or pulling levers. And the theory behind this is that reoffending it is less likely if law enforcement, some representatives of law enforcement, combine messages of certainty, swiftness, and severity of punishment, particularly for gun offenses. This was focused on gun offenses in particular, with a message that services and supports are available to people who buy in, to people who agree to go a different route. And this is carried out in a community context that is designed to convey dignity and mutual respect. So the most well-known version of this was David Kennedy's work in the original ceasefire in Boston, which, you know, by lots of different accounts was extremely effective. That was targeted on gangs. This version is targeted on individuals leaving the prison system on parole. Okay, so it consisted of
so Pat, just really quick, I'm not sure we're seeing the slides that you're sharing. So we're still on your cover slide.
Shoot, okay.
It's never clear when to interrupt.
No, I appreciate you interrupting. I don't know why it's not advancing, but let me try again.
Sure.
What do you see now?
Focus deterrence.
Okay.
Beautiful.
How about now? Guiding questions?
Yes.
All right, good. Okay, so now you got me off track, Jen. I'm not going to hit my target of 8 minutes.
No worries.
No, I appreciate that. Okay, so it was a single meeting. They were called in by their parole officer. It was supposed to be voluntary, but when you get told about a meeting by your parole officer, you know, most people attended, so over 80% attendance. And then there were 5 speakers. The first few speakers were representatives of the local police and then federal representative of the ATF, who gave this kind of harsh message of, if you pick up a gun, this is the number of years that you're going into federal prison, and we're going to take you as far as we can from your home, and it's going to be a serious, we're going to go after you. But if you take a different approach, that's when the community leader and service provider come into the discussion and really offer kind of, in some cases, very inspiring messages about what this means to the community, what role this person can play in the community, how much we want to provide help. And so those are the 5 messages. And then there's a chance to speak for the attendees to speak with all the representatives afterward. So I won't go into the literature here, except to say that there's a theory, and it was based on some evidence, that the impact wasn't just about those who came into the meeting, it was also about the message spreading into the community. So that's important because that guided the way that I set up the evaluation. So this was an RCT where we randomized both the neighborhoods where this was implemented and then the individuals within those neighborhoods. In theory, what that allowed me to do was estimate the effect of attending the forum, and it also allowed me to estimate the effect of living in a community where this is being implemented, but not actually attending one of the forums. Turned out that that contagion idea didn't happen at all. There's no evidence of it. So I'm not going to focus on very much on those results, except to say the effect was 0. Okay, so this gave us 4 groups of treatment and controls. These are the neighborhoods. So I did a block randomized design, matching within boroughs, places that had higher and lower levels of eligible attendees. I won't tell you which are the treatment and the control neighborhoods, but anyway, there are 5 sites, 3 in New York City and 1 in Albany, 1 in Schenectady in upstate New York. Okay, the randomization worked. The groups were very, very balanced across the sites. Okay, so I talked about the design, and let me just give the baseline. So in the control group, this is a number who actually had, so this is roughly over about 2,200 people are in the sample overall. And this is 31% violated their parole. So the 2 outcomes that we focused on were parole violations and arrests. Okay, about 31% violated their parole within the first 18 months after the program. About 28% were arrested. Although, as you can see here, very few were arrested for a violent felony. So this program was primarily focused on gun offenses. Very few people were being arrested. This was an extremely safe time in New York. Okay, so the overall impact, this is the estimate that I'll focus on. The punchline is this program had 0 effect on arrests. Okay, there was really no evidence that it affected the probability of being arrested in the following 18 months, and no effect on arrests for weapons offenses in particular. It did have an impact on parole violations. So the treatment group had about 4 percentage point lower probability of violating their parole within the following 18 months. And most of that was driven by absconding, which is essentially fleeing the city or fleeing the state, being no longer findable by your parole officer. So there's about a 30% reduction in absconding. And these are all intent to treat effects. Okay, so the treatment on treated effects are going to be a little bit bigger for all of these, but I think the intent to treat is probably the right way to think about the program impact. Okay, so that's the punchline. Big effect on parole violations, mostly driven by absconding. Okay, some subgroups that the people running the program were particularly interested in. There's some impact, some suggestive evidence that the impact was stronger for people just released from prison. There was variation across the sites. I attended meetings in all the sites. They were run effectively in all 5 of the sites. I think the variation was mostly variation by chance. And the only consistent finding was the impact on parole violations across the 5 sites, okay? Okay, no effect on contagion, except the one thing to notice here is that there might have even been a small positive effect on being arrested. That is, if you lived in a neighborhood where this was being implemented, but you did not take part, you were slightly more likely to be arrested in the next 18 months than other people who were eligible, but who were randomly assigned or whose neighborhoods were randomly assigned not to be in the program, okay? That probably takes a few more minutes to explain, but anyway, there's written documentation of this if you want to take another look. Okay, so just a couple months ago, folks from the Chicago Crime Lab, who are here on the bottom left of the screen, went through the non-trivial task of following up and getting data on the people who took part from New York State. This was a challenge, so they basically took my design and then followed up for a longer period to see if the results changed. They found the same thing. Okay, so same effect on violations, and particularly on absconding. The interesting thing here is that it persisted for a while. Okay, so it persisted for past 2 years following the intervention. Okay, so quick summary. This program generated a strong, robust effect on parole violations, driven by absconding, no effects on arrests, no effects, no evidence for the contagion of the message beyond those people who took part. Not much different by subgroups, maybe a little bit stronger for individuals recently released, and then substantial variation in results across sites that I attribute to chance, not to substantive differences. How do we think about this? So first off, the effects on violations were strong, but they were not anticipated. So this could be driven by a bunch of things. It could have changed behavior, but it also could have just changed the interaction between parole officers, police officers, and the attendees. No effects on arrests. Again, this could be attributable to changes in behavior, or it could have been attributable to the fact that the possibility that police officers were more closely engaged with these people who took part in the program. And this could potentially explain why people in the treatment neighborhoods who didn't take part actually had higher rates of arrests in the following 18 months. Last conclusion, no evidence for contagion effects. And then how do we think about this? So I just want to spend a few more seconds here to talk about what this means. This is an evaluation of a program, not a theory. And I think this is really important to be clear about, because focused deterrence is this umbrella term, and what was implemented in Boston ceasefire is entirely different than what was implemented in New York State with this individual level programs. So this version had a low dose. It was a single meeting, single point in time, and it was implemented in a city at a moment when gun violence was extremely uncommon. So this was the safest point, in New York City's history when this was implemented. And I think that context is crucial to understanding the outcomes. That said, to really understand what happened requires ethnography. And it just became crystal clear to me, as I was contracted to do this evaluation, I learned as much or more about what was going on from just talking to the people in the room and afterwards. And I'm not an ethnographer, but if we want to understand what is actually happening as these programs are carried out, then we need to do rigorous ethnography. And that became crystal clear from this program. So I'll stop with that. Thanks.